of a man who has spent nearly 3 decades chasing the unexplained. Not from behind a desk, not from the comfort of speculation, but from the road, from the field, from the very places where legends are born. Tonight, we are joined by Chad Lewis, author, paranormal researcher, and public speaker has worked and taken him across the globe in pursuit of the strange and the mysterious. With a background in psychology, Chad doesn't just collect ghost stories. He studies belief. He examines folklore. He asks, why do we believe what we believe and what those beliefs say about us? For nearly 3 years, he has investigated. That's actually 30 years. That's a long time, sir. That's really good. He has investigated hauntings, cryptids, UFO sightings, forgotten legends, and unexplained phenomenon. From haunted highways in the Midwest to international monster lore, to the quiet back roads of Wisconsin where stories still whisper after dark. Chad has authored more than 15 books covering haunted locations, cryptozoology, folklore, and unsolved mysteries, many rooted right here in the Midwest. But what makes his work compelling isn't just the topic, it's his approach. He visits the locations, he speaks to witnesses, he studies the history, and he blends field research with storytelling in a way that invites curiosity, not really fear. His message is simple: explore unusual places, learn their stories, and keep an open mind. Because mysteries still exist, and sometimes it's closer than we may think. Tonight, we're driven into decades of explorations, firsthand investigations, and the psychology behind the paranormal. This is Darkwoods Paranormal. I'm your host, Gabriel Von Graves, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, Raven Knight. And now, I'm excited to introduce Chad Lewis. Chad, how are you today? And thank you for joining us, sir.
Greetings from the back roads of Wisconsin. Great to
Greetings.
be here.
Absolutely,
Oh,
sir.
we're
Thank
so
you.
happy you're here, Chad. I want to start off actually just by saying I've followed you you said you've been doing this for 30 years. I think I followed you for at least 20 of these
Oh,
years, at least. I know that we've connected. You actually had a talk show right after a radio show I had at Wolf 108 FM in the Banbury place back in the day. I used to call you Sean Penn. I would say I would even say it on air that Sean Penn was coming up next. I knew it wasn't Sean Penn, but you know what I'm saying. You had this amazing talk show, and I loved. I would actually sit up in the haunted Banbury place, which was super creepy after dark, and just listen to you as you did your show. And so I've followed you forever. I'm super happy that you're here. So thank you for being on the show.
And let's not forget that radio station was owned by a gentleman who believed he was a werewolf,
Yes,
which
he
wow.
is
did,
Wow.
but you weren't
which is
supposed to talk
why
about it. You weren't
yeah,
supposed
yeah,
to.
exactly.
Which
Which is why
yeah.
he went named it Wolf 108, is that he believed he was a full-fledged werewolf, and he lived in a house with his pack. And some of them told me there were no doors on the bedrooms because they were all in the pack together. And it was a
Wow.
strange. He told me the whole story of how he became a werewolf, and that was the one topic that could not talk about whatsoever.
Yes.
So when it shifted, that radio station, which was an actual radio station
Mhm.
long before the internet, or and once that switched over to the community station, the first show I did was on werewolves with Linda Godfrey.
Right, right.
So I thought that was fun.
Did you
Oh,
ever get a chance to interview him? I mean, what was his belief behind him being a werewolf?
He was really elusive about it.
Hmm.
Like
mhm.
he would talk about it, but you weren't but I got to know him a little bit, and his story was, at least the version he told me, is that he was at a bar one night and a gentleman sat down across from him and they started talking, and the gentleman offered him a drink and said, if you drink this, you're going to become a werewolf, that I'm a werewolf or whatever.
Right.
And this guy thought about it for a bit and then downed it, and then sure enough, he was able to transform himself into a werewolf, but never offered, I can show you the transformation, or this is when it happens, or none of the details. But I always thought it was a great story.
Yeah.
That is a
Oh.
great story. Imagine like you just yeah, you drink this, you'll turn into a werewolf. Okay, why not? Why not?
Well,
Let's
at
try
least
it
he
out.
thought about it for a little while before he downed it, you know?
Yeah, got to give him that.
Yeah, yeah. He thought about the consequences, figured, let's do it. I like it.
Let's do it
Yes.
anyway.
I like
I
it.
think
And
that the funniest part is of that radio station is he gave me a trial. He was like, "Yeah, you can come up here and do a trial show or two or whatever," and I just kept showing up after that. He never told me to stop coming, so I just kept going.
that's awesome.
Yeah, so I ended up having my own radio show just because I kept showing up.
That's
And at
awesome.
as you said, a haunted studio there. The building was really cool.
Oh
So
yeah,
I've had the chance to visit the 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 Banbury place, right?
same
Hmm.
place. Yeah.
Banbury place, and it's interesting. Now you guys both work there,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So what stories do you have from that? Because that's right in our back door there in Eau Claire.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chad. I don't think I ever had any experiences. I think the creepiest thing for me was sitting and listening to Chad's talk show back with Terry Fisk, and they did a talk show, and it was just amazing. But once you're in that space and you know it's haunted, or haunted or whatever, I think it's probably haunted. But and you're listening to it, your brain is already creating things, right?
Mhm.
Because that's what you think's going on. But I don't know. What about you, Chad?
Well, the building has a long history, and it used to be the Uniroyal Tire
Mhm.
Factory.
Mhm.
And if you've never seen the new documentary, newish, a year or two ago, when the rubber hit the road, I think it's the name of it. Great documentary about Eau Claire and its Uniroyal origins, and very interesting, even if you don't like Uniroyal tires or anything. But so they had a lot of the memorabilia from the factory still
Mhm.
positioned around the building. And my grandfather actually worked in that building
Oh,
at
that's cool.
Uniroyal. Yeah, as
Yeah.
most people from Eau Claire probably have someone, an aunt, an uncle, someone who
Right.
worked there. But so they had all these pieces of the old tire making equipment on the wall and decorative pieces. So you could feel even if you didn't believe in ghosts or haunted stories, you could just feel the history of the place just
Mhm.
permeating everything.
So
That's actually super true. Yeah, that
did you?
place, the history of it, definitely you can feel.
Well, I watched the video. They have a little video where you can sit there in like a little auditorium that has all this stuff. And it's kind of interesting. Have either of you guys ever investigated that area or that building itself?
You want to go even? Yeah,
I was
go
gonna say
ahead.
I really haven't, but what do you think? Have you, Chad? I
Yeah,
want to
I
know.
put it in my first book. I think it was in there as one of the locations back. This would have been 2002-ish, before the book came out. And yeah, we interviewed, even before the radio station was there, I think, interviewed former workers, maintenance people. And my show was at night,
Hmm.
which was great because it was completely dead, because it's been renovated into some business offices, a
Mhm.
storage area, all these things. So after 5:30, it was completely dead in the building, and it was fun to walk around and get a glimpse. And I interviewed people. There's a story of a electrician that was growing marijuana in, and again, this was prior to it being legal everywhere,
Right,
or
right,
most
right,
everywhere.
right.
Um, in the electrical, like, circuit breaking areas and that, and someone found him in there. He had electrocuted himself, checking on his goods or storing his goods, and
Yeah.
he was seen quite a bit. But yeah, workers, these day-to-day workers who aren't interested in the paranormal, may not even believe in it, were telling me stories of seeing what appeared like factory workers from the 1930s
Mhm.
walking through like they're in some period costume, and then vanishing into a wall or walking into an area and disappearing into thin air, which for me, I always liked, because they renovated it so much that they switched around some of the things so that perhaps these spirits, if that's what they were walking down and ran into a dead end. Perhaps it wasn't a dead end while they were there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So in a building like the Banbury Place, what is the spirits that they're saying? What makes a person that And I think back in the day, I'm going to back up for a second. Back in the day, I think when you had a job, it was a lifer, right? I mean, that's what you did. You got a job and you
Mhm.
kept it. You don't bounce around like people do now, and you put a lot of your energy and your soul into that job. Um, why do you believe that older places like that people seem to stick around after they died?
I think you hit it on the head there that if these things are spirits of people that once existed, that once lived and have passed on, and for whatever reason, they're still there. And this is not taking into account that it's a residual haunting, that
Hmm.
it's just a memory being broadcast, that it's actually someone that was once alive. That you hit it on the head there, where a lot of these people worked there from the time they graduated high school or before,
Hmm.
dropping out of high school until the time they retired, that they spent more time there with their workers and colleagues than they did with their own families.
Right.
That this was their family, this was their life, this was their identity. So it makes sense that if you do pass on, you'd probably go back to that, maybe that thing that you were so familiar with. It's the same reason people think theaters are so haunted, the play, live theaters, is that people loved it so much. They put so much energy into it. It was such a part of their identity that when they passed on, they just wanted to continue what they were doing.
For the passion of it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And maybe it's something with the energy, especially when we talk about live theater and that. Maybe it was something with the energy that these
Sure.
things create, that it is passion.
Right.
Most of the people in theater aren't, the 1% of the actors who quote unquote make it. They're not the A-list celebrities.
Mhm.
They're doing it for the passion of it, the love of it, and that
Right.
energy, that maybe that somehow factors into this as well.
And I think that could actually segue right into being an author. You have 15 books, right? So,
Over, I think.
over
Yeah.
15 books. Yeah. How many books do you have exactly, Chad?
Well, I know this because just a few months ago, someone asked me how many I had, and I
Right.
gave them the wrong answer at a
Right.
conference. I said 32,
Okay.
and I went home and looked, and it's my 38th that just came out. So I was only
Wow.
Wow.
off by 6.
Wow. That's amazing. So being
Really?
an author, you put a lot of your energy into creating, dreaming of, thinking of these books. So in the mind frame of you being a creator, the original creator, which would be telling a story in a way that people can be there with you as they're reading the pages. So you put a lot of your passion into it. What draws you to the themes of your books? You have 38. So what makes you pick out what you write about?
Now, as opposed to in the beginning, now it's personal interest,
Right.
that I want the adventure of it. And most of my books are road guides on how to get to
Hmm.
places, whether it's mysterious creatures or hauntings. And I really want people to go out and experience it for themselves and to see the adventure of it all. And what I mean by that is, I can't tell you how many people tell me a story about gathering their friends and heading off to a cursed location, but nothing may have happened at the location, but they remember getting a flat tire on the way there and changing it and hearing something in the woods, and they're all
Right.
scared, and or stopping at a roadside attraction on the way to their location. So for me, it's the adventure, because when I started out in this field so many years ago, I thought it was going to be easy. I'd be able to explain some of these things, solve this case, figure out all the answers, not a problem. But at least on my end, that never happened. So a lot of people who got involved when I did, they burned out because they might go to a lot of these places and maybe things wouldn't happen. So they lost interest or just burned out. But early on, I shifted from whether or not these things are proving or disproving whether they're happening, to seeing the adventure of it all, the folklore of it, that collecting these stories, that what do they mean to us as a society or as humans? What does folklore mean to our daily lives? And I think that kept me going as long as I have, rather than I'm going to prove that this place is haunted or that the story's embellished, because that's very difficult, at least on the proving end.
Right.
I love that. You said something really interesting there that I want to kind of touch back to, or, circle back to, which is, what does folklore mean to our daily lives? And
Hmm.
I want to revisit that quote. What does folklore mean to our daily lives, Chad? Like, why do you think that folklore is so important, and why do you think that people still believe in some of the lures that are out here?
For me, and this always comes off the wrong way or comes out the wrong way, but at some point, to me, whether these stories are true or not becomes second level. Where what I mean by that is that folklore exists because we do. These stories, they come out of us. The stories that are non-indigenous here in America, they came with our ancestors who were all immigrants who came over and brought the stories of the werewolf, the vampire, and the haunted stories and sea serpents that I think they're an extension of humans, of whether it's a test of bravery, seeing who can sit on the haunted mausoleum the longest, or a rite of passage. I think folklore has played more of a role today than it did years ago, because there were always these rites of passages years ago, whether it was graduating high school, getting married, going to college, serving in the military, where a lot of those are no longer there. That, as you mentioned, in the old days, people might live in their entire life in the same town, work at the same place. And now people are moving so frequently that, they might not even know the history of the place they're living in, these legends, these folklore. So I think it's very important to keep that instead of, the rite of passage as an adult, you join the, Masons or whatever. Now it's, seniors go out to the haunted cemetery and see who can, run around and knock on the haunted gravestone, that type of thing. So I think folklore plays that into us, but it also really is the curiosity of it all, that what happens when we die? Are we alone in the universe? Have we discovered every known species on the planet? And for me, that's where folklore is at its most important. I'll give you a real quick example of the importance of folklore. I think we have some time.
Absolutely.
There was a story that one of the first legends I ever started researching was a case of Mary of Elk Lake Dam. It was right outside of my hometown of Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Hmm.
There's a small little place called Elk Lake, and there was a dam there, and two guys saw a woman in white there, and they told me about it. That's how I first learned about it. And people go out there and see a woman in a white gown haunting the place. Well, it turns out back in 1974, there was a woman that had been murdered out there. And the case was never solved. It was a brutal murder. She was hitchhiking from Minneapolis to Chicago. Mary Shalace was her name. And I went out there many times over the years because it was so close to me and I loved the story and I felt so terrible for her. And so I started over the years talking about this legend because more and more people had experiences out there. And I probably talked about it, I don't know, 500, 700 times at lectures throughout the last 30 years.
Right.
And you can imagine my surprise when last year they finally, after 50 years, caught her murderer.
Wow.
Yes, they finally used
What?
DNA from a hat he had left behind, a stocking cap at the crime scene. They finally had the resources and technology to run the DNA and found him living in Minnesota. And he admitted to it.
Wow.
Said he did it. He's in prison right now. And, that to me is folklore, that keeping these stories going, that
That's amazing.
50
Yeah.
years later, I would have never, you could
Right.
have given me 100 different cases where I never would have thought they would have captured this person. And lo and behold, but that's the significance, the power that folklore has.
So
And
what
imagine
is?
her
Go ahead,
story.
Rachel.
I just imagine though, like her story going just quiet. I mean, Eau Claire is a bigger town now, but I mean, it was a small town. Like, or these are small towns that you're talking about in that area. So, like, just imagine her case probably just would have went cold, and nobody would have even known her story. And then you talked about this. I remember hearing this story several times when I've been to several of your presentations. Just you constantly talking about this story, right? Like, imagine the impact that you've made in helping solve this case, Chad.
Oh,
Well, I think I may
saying.
have brought some attention to it, and the fact that the Dunn County Sheriff's Department never let it go. I interviewed some of the earliest detectives that were on scene when it happened, and many of them retired, obviously, through the decades, and the new people grabbed it, and they never let go of it either. And they deserve a lot of credit, because 50 years you can get a little dissuaded thinking we're never going to solve this. But yeah, it's always a balancing act, because at one point you're thinking, I don't want to exploit this. I don't want to, bring up painful memories for the families. But at the same time, many families of other cases have contacted me saying, anytime we can keep it in the public's eye, the better for us. So I always felt comfortable treating it with respect and keeping it out there. And then thanks to the great work of the detectives and the county sheriffs, that maybe she'll finally have peace if it's her that's out there.
That truly is amazing. So on folklore, what is the difference between a legend and a folklore?
Yeah. Well, folklore is passed on as the lore of folks, obviously. And folklore is a much broader umbrella, where folklore can consist of pottery, blankets and quilts, that type of folklore. I remember in college taking a folklore class, and the first day the professor said, now, this is the folklore of people through songs, pottery, artwork. There's no Bigfoot. We're not going to be talking about UFOs. And I remember going back the second day, and about half the class was gone.
Right.
Because that's what they wanted. So, but a legend can involve anything, where a legend could involve a car. And folklore is mainly our interaction with it, our human interaction with these things as well. Where it's the big umbrella, where legends can include urban legends, can now include a lot of the online digital creations, whether that's Slender Man or the Back Rooms or Doveland, Wisconsin, all those modern stories. And brings up a good point that people always say, we're not creating new folklore. There's no new creatures, no new legends. And that's just not true, that it's happening all over. It's just some of it has shifted to digitally.
I guess I never looked at it like that. That's amazing. So with the bridge lady, have you went back to see if she's still being seen after her murder was caught?
People still have experiences. I've been back there just to pay my respects, and because it was something 30 years ago I was working on, one of the first stories I ever researched to now. But people still have experiences there. But it gets to the point where I firmly believe that for some people, seeing equals believing, but for others, believing equals seeing. And what I mean by that is, there's a famous case in Wisconsin of Kate Blood, and she's in a cemetery, Riverside Cemetery in Appleton, Wisconsin. And the story is, she murdered her husband and the 3 children, and she would not be allowed burial inside the cemetery proper. And blood oozes out of her gravestone and all sorts of other things. Well, the story is a little embellished, that she did not kill her husband and their 3 children, that he died after she did. He went on and married someone else. And so the story's not quite right, the origin, but people still have experiences going there. And I don't know if because they're going there expecting something to happen, that they're either opening themselves up to it and allows it to happen, or maybe they're creating it, or they're looking for something that's not there. And every little branch or twig snapping in the woods is, the goat man coming after you or whatever.
Right.
So I don't know, but I definitely know that when people go somewhere expecting it to happen, they're more likely to experience something than those who are not. So I think people are still experiencing something at the bridge, and it may be unrelated to this woman's death, or if it was her to begin with. I mean, it's it's easy to think that because there was a murder out there, that's the spirit that's inhabiting. But, as we know, it could be a lot of explanations for it. I've brought psychics to that area and without knowing where they were going. And some of them were spot on, telling me stuff that was very hard to find out if they weren't getting it somewhere else. And then others where it was like, you'd be better off asking a piece of toast because they were picking up on stuff so far removed. But I don't say they're wrong, because maybe they were picking up on something else that was not even associated with this. So I guess short answer is, yeah, I have no idea whether this woman, now that her murderer has been found, if that's going to affect anything.
Right.
So we were just talking about projection for a moment.
Thank
You're
you.
projecting
Speaking of
whatever.
psychics.
So do you think, Raven and I have both experienced stuff like in the Sally House and other places that we had so many other investigators before us. Have you been to the Sally House?
I don't believe so. No.
Okay. Do you know the legend of the Sally House?
Yes.
So there
Yes.
was no little girl that died, right? I mean, it's just not there. But
Quick Google
there,
search.
right? But there are things that happen there that we've experienced. So
Mhm.
people that project things wanting to happen, do those at that time, years past, become legends because they projected something? Does that projection actually create something that is actually there? Let's take it as far back as Bigfoot, right? Bigfoot is not folklore; it's a legend, right? So, do you think somebody projected a big hairy beast, or do you think that that's a real thing?
Yeah, it's
It's like
the chicken or the egg type thing.
Right?
Did
Yeah, absolutely,
people
it is.
project it almost like a tulpa and create it,
Yep.
or was it there? And that's very tricky, because to give you an example, that one of the cryptid creatures I love researching is that of the Wendigo, and
Yes. Yes.
North American
Mhm.
native first indigenous people, the First Nations people. And for hundreds of years, the Wendigo was thought to be of a certain look. And now, if you were to Google the Wendigo, the depiction would be giant antlers
Yeah.
or horns and
Right.
more of an elk-like skull face, where
Right.
the original folklore and literature describes more of a monstrosity, a tall, thin, skeletal, emaciated creature. No horns, no antlers, no face of a skull. But since the 1940s, it really gained traction to the point of, if people now tell me that they believe they've encountered a Wendigo, it's almost entirely one with horns and antlers.
Mm-hmm.
So, sometimes parts of these legends get thrown in, and that becomes part of the folklore of it all, that it never was like that. But I mean, society has changed in the last 400 or 500 years. Maybe these things, these supernatural beings or whatever they are, maybe they change as well. Maybe the Wendigo of today is not the same as 500 years ago, that
Right.
they've shifted too.
Right. No, that's fascinating. I like that. What do you think, Raven?
I think that's very interesting. And like, I love that you asked the question about projection, Gabriel, because that's literally what I was going to do, is ask a question about projection. And if Chad actually felt like that was something that could be created. So that's a really interesting point, and that makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know. I'm right there with you. I wanted to. Okay, so I do want to. Gabriel brought up Bigfoot. He does it every time. We have to talk Bigfoot, and Chad, you know a lot of things about Bigfoot. So, what are your theories on Bigfoot? Gabriel, until very recently, did not even believe that Bigfoot existed. It was a thing. It was a long thing. It was like 8 episodes of him denying it, and then suddenly came to terms with the fact that Bigfoot probably does exist. But Chad, what do you think about creatures such as Bigfoot? What is your opinion on Bigfoot?
That's a tough question, because I go back and forth all the time over the years. Just, on the one hand, you have the flesh and blood, that it's an undiscovered creature out there, much like a moose or a beaver, whatever, just something we haven't discovered yet along those lines. That it's here the same way we think of an elephant being here, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year
Right.
long. That it can leave behind footprints and hair samples and alleged scat. But on the other hand, you get people that report it doing things that no known animal can do, whether it's moving at extreme speeds or disappearing, walking and then vanishing, or they often see it with mysterious lights or UFOs, that it's something supernatural, that it's not here, at least in the way we think of a deer being in our backyard. It's not like it might be here for short periods or something else. So I go back and forth, and I've really over the decades come to the conclusion that whatever it is, I'm leaning more that it's not just some undiscovered species waiting in the woods that we haven't found yet. That is just too odd and too unlikely that something that big with a breeding population in today's world with trail cams, ring camera, everything going on, that we wouldn't have. I mean, it's just the habitat shrinking every year.
Hmm.
So yeah, I go back and forth, but I truly believe people are seeing something that they truly think they see a biped running upright on its hind legs, covered in fur, huge proportions, 6 to 8 feet tall, 400 pounds. But what it is, I have no idea. What do you guys think?
Well,
Um,
so me being in kind of in by the Eau Claire area, I had an experience. I live out in the middle of nowhere, and I heard three knockings, right, and I was just out feeding my cows. I wasn't thinking Bigfoot's out here, you know. Um, and I heard three knocks, and they were very clear, like two pieces of wood, and I didn't think anything of it. I thought, well, we have a big, huge wood pile. Is in the winter. We burn with wood. That's how we heat our house. So I just assumed something got in there, was running, knocked over a bunch of logs, and that's the sound. And then as I was bringing feed, which I have to walk a little ways to feed my cows, I heard something that sounded like monkeys in Wisconsin, right? I mean, it was just they were going back and forth, and I ran in. I told my wife, I heard this noise. So we were trying to Google it, and the closest I could come was a bunch of owls making noises together. And then I had an experience a couple weeks after that where I was at 3 o'clock in the morning for whatever reason. I was in my garage, and the windows were open, and I was cleaning it, and I heard something. You ever get that sensation something's looking at you, right? And garage windows are usually a little bit higher up, so I kind of looked out and I saw this thing run by, and it made something sound like a goat, like a goat noise. And I thought, well, what the hell was that? So I looked out my garage and I saw something kind of running, and I didn't think much of it. I'm tired. It could have been a deer. Who knows? And then about about 8 weeks ago, I was visiting a friend in Missouri, and he was watching a lot of stuff about Bigfoot. And then all of a sudden, I heard those noises. I heard. I'm like, I heard that once. I said, those are owls. He goes, Gabriel. He goes, that's Bigfoot talking. I'm like, that's not Bigfoot. I was in Wisconsin, man. And then we were just started talking. Then he started showing me more and more videos, and I was like, maybe, So what I think it is I think it could be a shapeshifter,
mm,
bouncing around, from a goat one day to uh, Bigfoot noises. I don't know, but I think that there are parallel universes, and we talk about thinning of the veil, and I do think that every once in a while, when conditions are right, I think things accidentally cross over. My
I'm
interpretation.
I was gonna say I'm actually right there with you. I quote X Files a lot because I want to believe. I'm one of these people who want to believe in everything. I know that things aren't always going to be real, but I want to believe that they are. And so like for me, Bigfoot for a long time was this bipedal, big hairy ape that lived in like we don't know what's out in the middle of the woods in especially places like California, like deep woods are places that we haven't really been able to really get into, kind of like the ocean, like the deep ocean. We don't know what's all down there. Like we haven't. explored everything. So that being said, in the last few months, I've changed my mind, and I actually do think that maybe it could be like a portal or something, or where it's coming through and then it leaves, and that would make sense why we don't ever really, catch what I don't want to say catch one, but like I think that that's more likely that okay, now you see one, now you don't. That makes more sense. Like it's just a cross between either the universe or a portal or something like that. But that's my theory on a
So
Bigfoot. Yeah.
zoo cryptozoology is something that I find very fascinating, and I kind of throw it along the lines of, aliens, because a lot of it kind of interacts with each other. A lot of people that's, I had the pleasure of living in Elmwood, Wisconsin, which I'm sure you're familiar with, UFO capital, Wisconsin. They have UFO days, and it's an interesting place. But I can tell you that I lived close to that field where the officer saw the UFO, and there is a energy in Elmwood, just a sleepy town, right? I mean, not a lot going on, but everything is bigger there. The deer seem to be just a little bit larger, and there just seems to be a radiant of energy for some reason coming from there. So when people talk about Bigfoot, at least in my perception, I can't help but wondering about aliens. What do you think, Chad? You have a vast more knowledge than I would ever have. You've studied things in detail. So, and a lot of people that experience paranormal also have experienced things when it comes to aliens. So, what's your take between cryptozoology and UFOs?
Funny you ask. I'll be lecturing on this in like 7-8 days at the
Oh,
Frogman Festival in Loveland.
fantastic!
Yeah, UFOs and cryptids,
Yep.
exploring possible correlations is my
Wow.
program. And
So this wasn't planned at all, by the way.
right,
This just came up. I love it.
yeah, and I think it makes sense when you go to some of these places. Originally, when I started researching, we'd go to a place and ask about that legend, whether the legend was, let's say, a phantom hitchhiker walking down the
Mhm.
road, and we're talking to people and we'd ask, do you know anything about the phantom hitchhiker? And if they didn't, they'd say no, and that was it. But shifted early on to asking if they knew any stories of legends that are weird and unusual, where they might then say, I don't know anything about the vanishing hitchhiker, but did you hear about the mysterious well that was found at someone's property or something of that nature? The sea serpent in the local pond, that type of thing. And
Right.
what I'm finding at so many of these places is that you might have one thing happening, but other things are happening as well if you dig a little bit. That the UFO hotspot also has sea serpent sightings or haunted areas around it. So I'm finding that quite a bit. Whether it's all interconnected or not, I have no idea, but that happens more often than not. That if one thing's happening that's weird, it's more likely that it's several things happening.
Why though? Why do you think that is? Do you think that maybe there's something in that area that bridges one parallel universe to the other, or do you think aliens really do come and they're just attracted to certain areas?
Well, John Keel, who most notable for the Mothman prophecies, called those window areas.
Okay.
Whether you want to call them window areas, portals, or thin veils, that these are, I don't know if there's something about the land itself, the makeup of the land, or the people, or that it is being caused by some external source, aliens doing whatever, and that creates these ripple effects of all these other things, or that it is this area of a portal to another realm, dimension, time, place, whatever. But I'm fascinated when these things all combine, and it seems to be more than just coincidence. That the likelihood of a place having 5 different phenomena seems to be very strange.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I don't know, but it's very, very interesting when you start piecing these together. I feel like we're building a puzzle where we're missing most of the
Right.
outer
Right.
edges
Right.
that you start with, the border, and
Yeah.
maybe doing it in the dark as well.
I love that. So
Well, Chad,
go
can
ahead.
I just pop in and say something really quick?
Yeah.
Uh, Again, with I just circle back to quotes that Chad says about coincidences. I don't know if you've ever heard this crime and detectives in true crime cases have always said there's no such thing as coincidences,
Mhm.
especially in cases. So, like, if you have all of these things happening at once, that can't be a coincidence. I just
Mhm.
wanted to pop in and say that. That's all. Go ahead, Gabriel.
Well, I mean, if you separate the two from aliens and paranormal, what is your favorite paranormal experience that you personally have had?
You did it again.
Well,
Mhm.
Psychic.
Telepathy going on between the
probably.
two.
It happens all the time,
It does happen
Yeah.
all the time.
right? I'm convinced she somehow texts me and I read it without even looking. I don't know what it is.
I was,
Right.
yeah.
I love the stories that are completely bizarre,
Mm-hmm.
that are so far out there they seem almost too fantastical or outlandish to be true. And because when the overwhelming majority of times I go somewhere researching something, nothing ever happens. But at least paranormal, that is,
Mhm.
where there'll be times when I'll run into scary humans or just the
Mhm.
environment is really creepy and scary that I don't
Right.
want to be there. I get that a lot with Ed Gein's property, that I have zero psychic ability that I know of. So I'm not picking up on feelings or picking up on energy. That if there's a list of people with those abilities in the world, I'm last on that list. But there's something about some places where you don't need any of that. You just go there
Right.
and you say something's not right here.
Hmm.
Something doesn't feel good, and I get that a lot with Geen, his old farmstead, and often sites of tragedies, murders, suicides, untimely deaths, accidents, and even to the point where you could go there not knowing anything happened there, but you get a sense like right away that you don't like it. And the exact opposite is true. People will walk into a business or someone's house or meet someone and immediately feel like they belong there. So it works on both sides. But because I don't have a lot of personal paranormal experiences, it's always little things, just enough to make you wonder. Like, for instance, there's a place called Mary Dean in Wisconsin. It's an old boat landing and an island that was once inhabited, and there are stories of Mary Dean haunting the water like a siren, her spirit, and that hellhounds roam the area. And one of the first times I went out there was with a colleague of mine, an old friend named Terry Fisk. And when we got there, it was 10 o'clock at night, whatever, secluded, desolate place. And we're getting the trunk open, getting all of our stuff ready. We're going to kayak canoe over to the island in the middle of the night. And as soon as we got there, we heard some weird howling coming from the island.
Oh,
Didn't sound like a human, but it didn't sound like any known animal. So immediately we grab all of our recording equipment, turn it on, get it ready, and dead silent the rest of the night. So those are the puzzling types. Like, that was odd, but was it paranormal? It was certainly weird, but left with wondering, did that really happen type thing.
hmm.
Yeah.
Because you start second guessing it. At least
Yeah.
most people do.
And
So,
I think that's actually good to second guess it because, you know,
so
if you think you have the answers to everything, you quit looking. And I think we talked about that a little bit before we began. Um,
yeah.
what is? Do you have any paranormal or any alien encounter experiences?
Me personally, no, but I've interviewed several people who not only have encountered UFOs, but believe they've been taken against their will by these
Oh wow.
things.
Okay.
And probably one of the most profound experiences I had was working with Dr. Tom Franklin, who's now passed. And he was the department chair of psychology at UW Stout when I was there as a graduate student. And I'd been working with an abductee, a woman who believed she had been taken against her will by extraterrestrial beings for decades with her family. And she finally, after all these years, decided she wanted to undergo hypnosis. So she underwent hypnosis with Dr. Franklin. And that was one of my first times dealing with an abductee under hypnosis, hypnotic regression. And she telling us that breaks down crying, saying that she's going to grow out her hair. And Dr. Franklin thought, okay, that's odd. Why are you growing out your hair? And her whole theory was that when she's taken aboard these craft, she's naked, but the creatures, they're clothed. So if she could grow her hair out, she could get some semblance of control back, feel like she was empowered. And the scariest part listening to her is that while she was talking, she recalled every time she's been on board of this craft, she could recall seeing about a dozen other humans undergoing the same procedures she was undergoing. She didn't recognize them as friends or family or loved ones, but she knew they were humans and they were undergoing the same thing she was. And it was just terrifying listening to her, imagining in my head that, you're on this craft, you don't know what's going on. There's a dozen other people in your shoes. How terrifying that would have been.
So what if there are people that are taking, I mean, I'm assuming since, was it somebody in Wisconsin?
It was, yeah. It
Okay.
is. They're still here,
You know,
knock on wood.
Yeah. So did she have a theory, or did the good doctor have a theory of what they were doing when they were taking humans?
She was undergoing some medical test and she had no idea what was happening. And this was interesting because she had your typical gray sighting of the large almond-eyed, oval-headed creatures that in the 1990s, if you saw any depiction of an alien, that was the gray. But slowly over the years, she started reporting almost a Bigfoot-like creature in her bedroom, accompanied by these creatures. And then she would tell Dr. Franklin under hypnosis that she thought it was odd because she'd have to get up early to go to work. And in the dark, she would see, 7-foot owls swooping down on her, 7 feet in height. And
Wow.
thought it was odd. And he asked her, well, do you know of any 7-foot owls? She said, no. And then it turns out it was more like this winged humanoid type thing that was coming down. So here we're getting all these. She had a burn mark in her backyard where this craft was said to have landed, that we took soil samples and grass samples from it. And so all these weird things were happening to her. Again, not just typical alien stuff, but more cryptid and supernatural things. But what I can tell you is that she's made peace with it. I think that feels that she can't do anything about it, that it's happening, whether she likes it or not. And she's tried to deal with that, which must be a terrifying thing because, it went back to when she was her fiance, her husband was her fiance, and they were, camped out on a road trip and they were in their vehicle sleeping, and all of a sudden it starts shaking and they think some kids playing tricks, but almost like it's getting lifted and set back down, and a powerful light is shining in where they can't see anything. And they chalked it up to a nightmare. Must have been, we had a few drinks, weird dreams. And so many witnesses often are looking for a more logical or rational explanation to explain away what has happened to them, so they don't even want to entertain that it was a ghost or they saw a Bigfoot or whatever.
So when you were literally in the room as she was under hypnosis talking, did anybody ask questions about smells or taste in the air, or details of being on craft?
Yeah, because she continued her regression work with Craig Lang out of Minnesota Mutual UFO Network, who's now deceased. And he got into a lot of details. And I remember at the time, this was 25 years ago. I remember at the time, going minute detail after detail of Dr. Franklin walking her through that. And I don't recall offhand what those were, but I remember at the time thinking that we're really covering this in great detail. And her memory was pretty sharp on a lot of these things. Although some of it, like she remembered the beings being in her room. And then next thing she knew, she was in the craft. But like so many other abductees, she couldn't remember how she got in there. She couldn't remember whether it was teleportation or she floated through a door or a window. She couldn't recall some of those big gapping details, but I remember her remarking about the clothing and how sterile it was on the craft, and that she believed these things weren't necessarily out to hurt her. And that's common with a lot of abductees. They say that sometimes these creatures say, don't worry, calm down. We're not going to hurt you, much like a veterinarian might do with a dog at the vet. But even going further, sometimes saying, well, we're doing this because you gave us permission to do this, or you volunteered, or you said we could do these things. And that's always a piece of the puzzle that's always intrigued me. The idea, whether maybe they're lying and manipulating, but oftentimes they'll say, well, you told us we could. We have permission to do this. Almost like a contract of some sort.
Wow. So one must ask, I mean, in my head, so I mean, what a horrible, horrible experience, Chad, to have to even listen to, very most going through it, right? It's hard not to feel for these individuals, but if it's a craft, or beings that are more technically advanced than we are, you would think that they would do more with the emotional part of it, you know? Um, you think they'd figure out a way to scrub it. So the individual that's undertaking this isn't afraid, or doesn't have these regression memories, you know?
Yeah, 100%. I think of the technology we have. If someone goes to get a colonoscopy, they
Yeah,
probably don't remember it.
no,
It's been erased. They remember going to the hospital, and then next thing they know, they're in their bed, someone brought them back. But so you'd think if someone has the technology so advanced to get here to our planet, they probably have the ability to just wipe it clean. But instead, we're getting people left with screen memories, as they're called, that they don't remember an alien taking them. They have that 7-foot owl in their driveway, or a deer coming in and talking to them in their bedroom, or a giant 4-foot squirrel in their backyard talking to them. And it's the same, the big eyes and
right.
the similarities, but these screen memories who seem to be implanted. But I agree with you that, if they're so advanced, especially when we know that the abduction stories have been going on for decades, that they wouldn't have gotten better at it. And sometimes it seems like they make the stupidest mistakes ever, that they'll bring someone back in different pajamas than they went to bed with, or they're wearing slippers that they don't own.
Right.
Or there was even a case where a colleague of mine, John Carpenter, had a case where 2 people were abducted the same time, the same night, and they put them back in the wrong places, the wrong houses.
What?
That, person A and person B were taken out of their apartments, whatever, and then brought to the wrong place.
They just switched up the paperwork, Chad. That's all.
Yeah,
that was.
exactly.
It was just,
Even aliens make mistakes. Listen, it's
Yeah,
a job.
true.
Maybe
Right.
it's a job for them. It was the first
Right.
day on the job, or they've been doing it, but they messed up that night. It's fine.
They had an
Yes.
intern that walked by, 2 pieces of paper fell on the floor, right? And he's like, I don't know. So he just 50-50'd it, right?
Yeah.
It's
There was one
probably-
of the other.
Right. I don't
Who's
know.
going to believe it anyway?
Right. Yeah. They're not going to remember,
Yep.
Oh
That's
man.
great. So what is
Oh.
your favorite cryptozoology folklore?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100% the Wendigo is my favorite. It's one I've been researching for nearly 3 decades. I just put out a book with my colleague Kevin Lee Nelson, and it's one where I state all the time that I feel like I know absolutely nothing about the legend. That
Right.
it's so complex and so bizarre and so old. It's one of the oldest North American legends out there, but I feel like we were a couple hundred years too late to really get the core of the legend. That I feel like if I keep doing this for another 40, 50 years, I'll still know very little about that legend, because it's just so vast and complex. But I love it so much. It's just so bizarre and so odd that I think that one piques my interest more than anything. And then second place would probably be, for me, sea serpents. I love stories of lake monsters and sea serpents.
I think, and so do I. I think a lot of that goes to our childhood, growing up watching cartoons or whatever, they always had that mystical creature in the water, So what else, what other books do you have? I know you have 38.
38.
You
He's got to list them all in
Yeah.
alphabetical
So
order.
I can't.
no. So what is your second favorite book that you have written about?
Ooh, great question. Probably the Van Meter Visitor I would put up there, because this is a little known story out of Iowa from 1903 where the
Right.
town seemed to be attacked for 5 nights by an 8 foot giant bat like creature that had huge leather like wings, featherless, a horn on its head that could project light. And throughout the week, the townsfolk tried to capture it and they shot at it with every weapon they had. And this thing could shoot a beam of light and release some odor that would erase memories. It seemed to be impervious to weapons, that they would fire at it and it would just vanish as though it wasn't there. And then after 5 nights or 5 known nights, it's just gone. It went descended back into an underground mine with a smaller version of itself, which appeared on the 5th night. And then the story just ends. It's like, that's it. The newspapers quit covering it. There was never a mention of it in Van Meter. You would think someone would say, 3 years later, do you remember that giant 8 foot bat that was attacking us?
Right.
But nobody ever mentioned it. And it's just so bizarre and so weird that it can't be true. Yet everything we've done to research it shows that on all accounts, we have no reason to doubt that these most prominent men of Van Meter in 1903 saw this thing and reported it. I mean, to the point where the bank manager was so afraid that it was a intruder or bank robber trying to stake out the town that he sat one night in the bank with a buckshot in his shotgun. And then in the middle of the night, he saw light flashing in, and behind it was this giant form of a bat-like creature. And he was so spooked, he shot out the front window of the bank,
Wow.
shooting at this monster. And the next morning, they found these giant 3-toed prints in the sand of something that was out there. And again, 1903, I don't know how many people would be comfortable putting their life savings in a bank where the person's shooting out the front window at monsters at night.
Well, the optics aren't good for at all,
Exactly.
Yeah. But that's
So-
fascinating.
That's
It
one of
really
my
is.
favorites. And again, you're seeing this continuation of weirdness that I love UFO stories. I love
Yeah.
Bigfoot stories, but at some point they can get a bit monotonous. And what I mean by that is someone sees a weird light in the sky and then it vanishes, or someone sees a large biped running by and then it's gone over and over and over. Whereas you get these stories of a winged bat creature erasing memories in town and laughing at people shooting at it. That's a little bit different.
Right. So
Wow.
we know when legends are told, things are changed. So, and we talked a little bit about, the internet, Slender Man, that kind of thing. What is the next legends that are 2 generations we'll be talking about?
They're all going to be digital. They're all going to be online. Some of the most fascinating legends right now are happening online. They just announced there's going to be a movie on the legend of the Backrooms, which the Backrooms were this legend that if you're not careful, you can get transported to the Backrooms, which are a series of endless 1970s looking office space with just the dividers and the carpet and the drab lighting. And it's just years and years and years of going through this maze of the back rooms, and nobody will ever get out, and you're just trapped in there. There's monsters in there, and people have made short films about it. Well, it turns out that the original Backrooms photograph of the area came from Wisconsin, of course. A hobby shop in Oshkosh
Okay.
was renovating and took some pictures of what they were renovating, this old office space. And someone found it and created the story of the Backrooms, and now people talk about it as though it's a real legend. So those are going to be, I think, the future, where like Dublin, Wisconsin, it's this town in Wisconsin that seemingly never existed. It never appeared on any maps. It was never taken off a map, never is known, but people remember going there. They remember visiting their grandparents who lived there, eating at the Dublin restaurant. They have photos,
Oh,
they say, of it. And it never existed. It doesn't exist, but people have, the Mandela effect almost,
I
where
was gonna
people
say.
have a memory of Dublin, but that came through the internet of people posting, like, here's my photo. Has anyone ever heard of Dublin? And so I think those are going to be prominent. I hope that society, we kind of get away from screens and digital and get back to some new monsters. And I think it'll probably, there was a great X-Files, I think it was the Fluke Man, where they talked about so many species are going extinct, but
Mhm.
because of chemicals and technology, what new species are being created? So I think
Mm,
that's interesting as a planet gets different from, climate change and all of that. What might spark in its place?
That's fascinating. So on the Mandela effect, which I love,
there it
I
is.
literally love, only because,
I
I think memory is a very fascinating thing because I could be in a room in a discussion, and when you leave that room, everybody's interviewed and they'd all have a different point of view or different perceptions of what it was about. So in your research, what have you found out about the Mandela effect?
Yeah, just basically what you said, that people have different remembering of
Mm,
things that happen. That I grew up and remember it one way, or the name of something you remember is spelled different or looks different or is flipped, that we're not all living in the same perception. And
right.
this, I tie this into the paranormal too, because when I first started researching, if you had a carload of people seeing a UFO, you'd interview them separately,
Yep.
get their description, have them draw out what they saw. And if those things matched up, it was more credible. That,
Right.
Yeah.
look, they all saw the same thing. They all said it was a craft with a shining blue light and 13 feet in diameter. Whereas now we understand that people see these things, or these things are projected to them differently.
Mm,
That if we're out in the woods together, the three of us, and we see something run by us, three of us might have seen three different things,
Right.
yes.
whether
Right.
we're picking it up different or it's projecting to each of us. You had mentioned earlier about shape shifting, that you
Yep.
thought maybe Bigfoot was a shapeshifter. And I agree with that, but there might be a point where it doesn't need to shapeshift. It's shapeshifting in our minds, that
Right.
Yeah.
to
Absolutely.
you,
That's a
it's a
good.
goat. To
Right.
me, it's chupacabra.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. I love that.
Actually, that's really interesting because if you ever were into true crime, like eyewitness accounts are actually the least credible of anything because people's perceptions of what they see are always different. Like, or you can't remember it. Like you because you're not in the moment, you're not like, oh, there's a 6 foot man over there and he's got dark hair because you're doing your own thing. Like those things are very that's very much about I don't know, the way that eyewitness accounts go, I guess is what I'm saying. So
Yeah. And I
that's
remember scientists saying that every time we pull out a memory and put it back, it changes a little bit,
Oh,
mm,
to
sure.
the point
mhm.
that researchers have done things where years ago they would interview people and have them tell them a story about themselves, some event that happened, some incident, and then they'd get together with them years later and have them tell that story, and they'd tell it completely different, of course, but the researchers knew the story, they recorded it, so they would say, no, that wasn't a red car, you were in a car accident, that was a green truck. And the people would say, no, I don't believe you. And they'd go back and play them their original story,
Wow.
and they still wouldn't believe it. They still
Wow.
remembered it as how we remember it today. So I agree completely that it's almost as though eyewitness accounts, are, I don't want to say they're worthless, but it seems to be not very much.
I think that's fascinating. But then again, if we look at our own memories, like as a child, some of the stuff that happened to me that interested me in the paranormal, as an adult, you reflect on it differently. You see it differently. You've had experiences, and you
Yeah.
can kind of, well, what could that be? So you might have been wrong the first time you told a story, and as you think about it, it becomes more clear. Maybe,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
But I think you're a fascinating man, Chad. So
Yeah.
you are going to the Frogman Festival where people come and see you. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. If you're in the Ohio area or wherever,
Right.
it'll be Saturday, the 7th of March
Hmm.
in Loveland, Ohio. And just type in Frogman Festival online, and you tons of great speakers, really cool vendors, and you get to come to the place where a frogman creature was spotted holding a bizarre light or wand of some sort, and just really weird. It's one of the most unique paranormal festivals out there, and I'll be, as I mentioned, doing UFOs and cryptids.
That's
Yeah,
fascinating.
which is
You
amazing.
you have a well of knowledge, sir. And before we close the lantern and step out of the dark, I want to take a moment to sincerely thank you again, Chad, for joining us tonight. You've been amazing. Chad, your decades of research, your steady pursuit of the unexplained, and your willingness to talk and walk into the places most people only whisper about, I find amazing. In your books, you have 38 of them, and I'm sure you have plans to even create more. And I so much appreciate you're here. We're grateful for your time. We're grateful for your insight. Chad, thank you again for being here. And where can people find you? Where can people find your books? How can they reach out to connect with you?
Sure. If you want to tell me a story, ask a question, it's just Chad Lewis Research is my website. But I always tell people, think of the weirdest legend you can think of. Go out there, and that's probably where you'll find me.
Right.
Yeah, I
That's
love that. I
absolutely
love
a good
that.
way to end. I love
Actually,
that.
I wanted to thank Chad as well. Chad actually shaped my love in the paranormal. I mean, X Files definitely played a part too, but Chad definitely played a part as well. Like I said, I've followed you for like I don't know 20 years or something like that. The books that I know it was like Haunted Wisconsin or something like Road Guide to Haunted Wisconsin, something like that was probably the reason I ventured off to Caryville as many times as I did, which is ridiculous. Mary Dean, you mentioned earlier. I'm like, I
Mhm.
remember going to Mary Dean. We were sitting out there at the boat landing trying to get stuff to happen, which you're right. Nothing ever happened, but it was the adventure that got us there, and that was always fun. So thank you, Chad, for everything you've done.
And
Thank you both, and keep an eye out.
thank you. And thank you to our audience for joining us. And if you don't know anything about Chad Lewis, he's an interesting man. Please reach out to him. Until next time, stay curious, stay aware, and do stay safe out there. Thank you for joining us. Chad, you want to just hang on a second as we sign off? Thank you.
All right. Thank you.